Hello, this is Randy with Excel for Freelancers, and welcome to part 14 of the Employee Manager, where we have created an amazing login screen for user access. We're going to show you just how we created that. We've also added on to the admin screen by creating an event notifications tab, where we're going to handle all of our email and pop-up notifications regardless of event type. We're going to show you how to create those and how to create these dynamic pop-up notifications. We have had that ability into the events list here, where we check for notifications and all of our email gets created, and we have a dynamic notification pop-up right here. So we're going to show you how to create those pop-ups. I can't wait. We've got so much to cover, so let's get started. All right, thank you so much. I'm really happy to have you. We've got a jammed-packed lesson for you today. We've got so much to cover, although it's just a few items. Each one of those are a ton of brand new types of features that we're going to show you, things that you may never have seen before in ways that you may never have seen me teach them before. So I can't wait to get started. Let's go over a little bit of a summary of what we're going to show you. I've created a user login and security form. Now, you're familiar with this type of idea, but we've done it in such a way where it's a little bit more streamlined, where we've removed the border. We've created a really nice little effect here, and we've got the username, password, the ability to remember the password, and a login. So we're going to show you how to create this really beautiful login form, very professional, just how we did that. Of course, we've got a login screen here, and all this is just a blank screen. This is going to be our start screen. When a user logs in, they're going to see this screen. They're not going to see any other tabs until they've logged in. So that'll be important. I've got all of that feature, but we don't have it working right now because I want you to have the application to the full, but all the code is there, so you'll be able to run it anytime you want. In the admin screen, we've added a lot. Now, we've updated this user settings. We've updated this a little bit. We have the ability to, of course, add in a username, password, email, and a user type. Now we've set a user type, and the reason is we want to show or hide or enable or disable certain features, certain sheets, certain aspect of this application based on a user type. Now I have set 4 different user types initially. We have admin, and that'll probably have the entire full feature ability on the application. We have a manager, and that's going to give us some limited features, but mostly all. And of course, I'm going to show you how to control the features. So you decide what a manager is enabled or able to do. You decide what a user is able to do. And then I have one that's called a time clock. Now remember, I said if we choose time clock, I wanted to have a dedicated machine just to use for time clock. So if we were to choose a specific user for time clock, give it a password, then only the time clock, only this screen would be useful. And that's nice. If you have a machine that you're going to dedicate just for the time clock, you may want to have this screen only. So you might want to dedicate a user for this. And I've added the ability to log out and a start and stop. Of course, we have had that already, but I've just added a little bit of features because something like this time clock where users, it may be a dedicated machine, and this machine will do nothing else but clock in and clock out employees. So you have that feature available. So we've done that, and what we want to do is we don't want to have multiple notifications sent from multiple users. We really want to set one specific user to create or send notifications. Otherwise, you'd get multiple emails from many people with the same content. So we have the ability to set which particular user will be sending out the notifications, which is the emails or having the notification pop-ups. So that's important there. Also, I have added, in here I've just added a little bit of a summary of Ledger. It gives you kind of what my idea is for the admin, but remember, you can change this how you want, and I'll show you how to change it. It's super easy to change. This is just simply my idea of what you might want. An admin would have full rights to all the sheets, would have the ability to edit and remove all records, create payroll, and view all reports, and of course unprotect sheets. Whereas a manager might have the ability to view all records and maybe create payroll reports, but not the ability to remove selected, maybe not delete payroll or delete employees or something like that. You may want to limit the manager's access. And of course, a user would have very limited, they would not be able to view or view any reports or do payroll. They may be able to view the schedule and add employees and view employees, and add events, but something basic like that. So I've broken it down into 3 different areas, and this is kind of it's a really easy way to create new users very quickly simply by assigning them a user type. Some call this user type. Let's call this user role or user type, because user roles are also very common with that, so we can call them either way. So user roles, so we're gonna go ahead and create that. And next up on the event notifications, this is a brand new tab. And the idea is this: based on a specific event, let's say it's gonna be a review or a training or a new hire, something like that, you may wanna create a specific email template. You may want to have a very specific email to BCC. You may want to CC it to a manager. You want to have specific attachments. So for every event type, you can set a specific default email notification, and you can have a default pop-up. This is a pop-up. Remember, this is a pop-up. This will appear on any screen at a specific date and time so that the user gets an alert for this particular event. And one is an email, and we can have both. So that's a really new, great feature. We have the ability to add attachments. And by selecting any of the events below, you can see it up at the top. Now, this table will be limited to the event types, meaning you will only want one default email template per specific event type, right? So we have one for new hire, one for training, termination, review. And just remember, in the admin screen, we have the ability to choose what event types, right? So we can set our event types to whatever we want. And then what we do is we set an email, an automated email. Let's say we want to send somebody a birthday wish on their birthday. We can set that. Or maybe we want to send them, maybe if they're terminated, we want to say, "Dear employee, you are fired. Bye-bye now." Or something maybe a little bit more nicer. Maybe that's not so nice, but you get the point. So you get to set whatever and I've included a whole lot of variables that you can use within both the email message, both the email subject, and the pop-up notification. So we can use these variables, and what might those variables be? Well, they could be an event name, the event type, notes, when the event was created, the start or next day time of the event, the end day. So for example, if we have a training, we might want to notify the employee when their training is. So for example, hi employee name, this email should notify you of your upcoming, and then event name would be training, right? Scheduled from, and then start date to next date. Here are the following details. And of course, you could put the event notes in there. And of course, when the actual email gets created, it would contain all of the information that we put in, remember, in our events. Let's go ahead and look back at our events. It would contain all the information, our event notes, our event name, perhaps our created on day, our start date. So for example, if we have let's pull up a training, right, which contains both the starting on and ending on, we have that ability. So the information is contained here in the events list here. And of course, in the events list here is all the data is contained in this. So that's where it's going to pull the data from, but we want to set the following all. So we have all of these: username, user email. And of course the username and the user email, those are now created based on our login screen. And of course we're going to show you that, and that's going to be hidden in columns A and B, and we're going to go over that. But basically whatever logged in user we have is going to show up here. Whatever user email is going to show up here, so we have the logged in information. So now we know the user that's logged in, that has been logged in. So we're going to be able to use that in our notifications as well. So we have all those. If we want to set a new notification, we just click new, and then we enter the email type. Let's say we want to email to the email to the employee, email employee. That's going to give us our email address. And then we can put the event type. We would, of course, select an event type. Maybe it's a company party, or maybe it's a new hire, and we can just set a BCC. Maybe we want to BCC it to the user email. And then user, we would just do that. It's going to send it to the user, or you could put in a specific email address. You could easily just type in admin@testcompany.com, right? So you can do that too as well. So you can put it into anything. Right? You can even have a static email address and not a dynamic. And of course, you could put in a subject, and the subject could contain anything like new hire for, and then you can put the employee name. And this way you can send them, specific attachments. If you may want the new hire to fill out certain forms, you can just simply add a file, and of course it'll add any file you want, whatever you decide to attach here, will go with the email. And then you can put in your email message, and then you could just say, hello, employee name. And then of course when we want to go enter, comma, and then alt enter will go to the bottom of the line. Welcome to our company. Okay, so you get the idea, and you can just fill this out. Then when you're all done, you just click Save Notification, and this event has a notification. Okay, good. So the event, right, we only allow one event, new hires here. So we only have one event type. So we would change that. We already have that. So, but we don't have, let's say, promotion. Let's say we don't have that. It's not on our list, so we can save that. Promotion, okay, and save new. Now it's going to save. Remember, we only want one default per type, so that's important. We're going to go over that. Oh, and of course, if we want to set up some pop-up text, we can do that as well. Just, we would say, let's say promotion, congrats. We could do this, congrats on your promotion. And of course, it's going to show up right here in our we can put dynamic labels in here as well, so it's going to show up when it does. So that's a great way. We can delete them, new notifications. So we're going to go over all of that. So I'm looking forward to showing you that. So we've got that. And also, let's go ahead and take a look at what else we've put in. We have the ability to send them. So when we go ahead and click on the events list, now notifications are based, if you remember correctly, they're based on this reminder. We had to set a reminder for it. So these are going to be set when we want the reminder to be sent, whether it's email or whether it's going to be a pop-up or whether it's going to be both. And here's our pop-up. So if this is yes, it's going to be yes. If this is email, and then we want to send a reminder. So, and if it's not been sent yet. So if we click on this, nothing's going to happen, right? Nothing's going to happen because they've all been sent. But what if we delete this reminded on? Delete that. Check for notifications. It's going to see that one hasn't been sent. Dear Fred Fredders, you are fired. Bye-bye now. Okay, so it's been sent to Fred, and then BCC Randy here. So that's going to be when we close that. And normally this would not appear because we have it appearing because it's not going to send. But normally you will have it, so it just gets sent automatically. The admin wouldn't need to know about it. It wouldn't need to appear on the screen. And I'll show you how to change that. So once we close that out, you're going to see that the notification, now we have the termination notice. For Fredders has been terminated. Their Fred was terminated for talking to the boss. Nobody talks to the boss. Okay, so we have that pop-up. So this will appear regardless of the screen that you're on, regardless of the screen that you're on. So if we close that, right, and let's go ahead and remove this again. I'm going to put no for email because we just got the email. We know what the email looks like. So we're going to put no. We don't want to see the email again. And I'm going to remove this reminded on so that it appears again. Now when we go to, let's say, any other screen, oh, I guess I need to run the macro. Let's go ahead and run the macro. I have no button to run the macro. So we're going to go into the code, and we're going to go into notifications right here. And I'm just going to run the code right here. So I'm just going to run this code right here. And you're going to see that this notice appeared also on this screen. It's going to appear on regardless whatever screen the user's on, it's going to appear. And all we got to do is close it. So it's a really, really handy, maybe a little bit annoying, but a very, very handy and very important note that's going to appear regardless. And that pop-up can be deleted. It doesn't matter because it's coming from a source that cannot be deleted. So it's a shape, but user can delete it. That's just fine. It'll appear again, no problem. When they click close it, the code will actually delete that shape because it's being copied over from the source. So that's fine. All right, so you see the notification is going to appear regardless of the screen that they're on, and that's important. We don't want them showing only on one screen when they're on another screen. So that's important. All right, let's get into the training and see just how we did. And we're going to start with this login, and we created this beautiful login form. We're going to show you how we did that. So let's go ahead and get into the VBA Manager and see how we did that. Into the Developers tab, Visual Basic, if you don't have the Developers tab open, make sure you click on the File and click on the Properties right on the options here. And we'll go ahead and go into the Customize ribbon, and you'll see that the Developers tab is selected. You will want to make sure you select it as well. Alt F11 will also get you there, and that'll bring you into the VBA editor. So let's go ahead and take a look. There's a few modules that have been created. And let's go ahead and take a look down here into our code. We have user login macros here and user rights macros here. We're going to go over those two. And we also have a brand new user form called login form. Now, as you know, creating the login forms and creating any type of form is not the prettiest. The forms, it's kind of an older type of, maybe about 20 years older actually. So Microsoft has not done a great job with updating it. So that means we have a lot to work with. When we do that, we have to be very creative. And the idea is basically to get it to look like this. I created a background in this blue border, this icon, and even the borders. Now look at those. You see how it's off? You see how my buttons are actually off this blue space, but when you run it, everything lines up. Why is that? Well, because I've added some code that is going to remove, let's go back in here. I've added some code that's going to remove this top frame here, this login frame, because I don't want to show that. So when that gets removed, everything gets moved up, and that's why the buttons line up with these blue ovals. Now, how did I get these blue ovals? That's actually part of a background picture. So what I did is I created a background picture, and I put this icon, and I put it all on a background picture. So when we click on properties, and we take a look at this picture, we're going to see that's a bitmap, right? And we click on it, we're going to see that's going to actually be a bitmap that I used. And I used something called Pixlr, which is a really, really great feature. And I wanted to show you that. And it's called Pixlr. It's a free, it's like Adobe Photoshop, but this is free, and I'll include the link if you'd like. It's great. So this gives you the ability to create designs. And so what I did is I just found a background, like a steel background, and then I just created some ovals, like here, like let's say you can click on a shape, right? And you can click on an oval, and then let's say we don't want to fill the shape, and then we can set the border, so maybe a blue border, and then click OK. And then maybe we want a border radius, so we can click on the radius. It's already 20. So that's how we did that. That is how I did that. Let's go ahead and update that a little bit. Border size, so you can actually, we need to increase the border size, so that's not enough. So we can create the border size and create a border here. So you see it gets larger. So we can do any color, and if you change the color, let's change the color to blue. Change it, bring it over here. So this gives you an idea of how you can customize your backgrounds to make them just fit. And that's too much of a border, so maybe we want 7. So you can see here, this is how we have the ability to create the shape, and the border and everything. So it's really, really a handy tool that you can use. So I thought I would show you how we did that, and I basically downloaded and just pasted this icon in. And you can add any images, just simply add a layer and then open an image as a layer. Basically what that's going to do is going to give you the ability to add a specific image. So let's say I wanted this login guy here. And let's go ahead and find him where I added him. So we can drag this guy anywhere we want to. Here he is here. So I can then move this guy here anywhere I want on the form. So we can create these. Once we create the picture, we can save it, and then it'll be our background for the picture. So I thought I'd show you that because I wanted to show you how I was able to create that background. And that gives us a really professional background that I thought you would like. So now we know how we got the design. Now let's go ahead and take a look at how we got the top border. So let's close that and go back into the VBA editor under the login form. Now I wanted to get rid of this top border. I don't like that. And I just found some code on the internet because just to remove it, and you can find it too. And I'll go ahead and go over it here under the login macros, and you'll take a look at this code right here. This is our private function here, and I just located this somewhere. It's on, this particular code is on a lot of websites, the same exact code, and all it does is it hides the bar form. So make sure when you want to do that, just copy and paste this code. And then also the important thing is you see this hide bar form here, hide bar form. This must be located in the login form. Let's view the code here. And you want to make sure that you have this hide bar 𝐸 under the initialize. So that means when the form gets created, this particular macro hide bar 𝐸 is going to run. This is going to run for this. And that way, when we run the code, it's automatically going to remove that top bar. So that's how it is. And that's how it's done. We don't need to go too much into detail because you can just copy and paste it right there. And you don't need to know the exact detail. But that code, those two macros, and I'll show you those just once again. So when we see the login, so it's this right here, this option explicit, this is used, the VBA7, so we need to know this for either whether they're going to be public declare or PTR safe for 64-bit or 32-bit. So we need those, whether they're 64-bit, because of course we are going to be running those functions. So we need to know for the menu bar. And then of course we're going to run this code right here, which is the sub hide bar, and that's going to basically remove the bar from it. All right, so next up we have a macro called show login form. All that does is just show the form. We've created the form. Here's the form name, and then show. So we have that. So next up, what we want to do is we want to check for the user. When the user presses OK, what do we do? So let's go ahead and go over that. So when we log in, the user is going to put their email address, and then when they click 1, 2, 3, they're going to click OK. And I don't want to. I guess I can click OK, and then all of the sheets, and then the login form is going to hide automatically. So let's unhide that. I'm just clicking unhide right now. So unhide. I know it's off the screen. Here we go. Back on the screen. Login. The login form's hidden automatically, which is nice. We're going to show it for now. Okay. So we have that. So when we log in, it hides the login form, and then it shows or hides sheets based on the user security. So back into the admin, let's go look at those users. Now we have these users. We have a username. We have a password. We have an email and a user role. So let's take a look at some of the named ranges that I've created for that into the formulas. Name manager, and of course, let me drag that over here for you. User, let's go ahead and take a look at user. We have user email, and I didn't use offset because we're not using a drop-down list, so the entire range is good enough for us. Offset for the email, we have the user name here, and we have the user password. So I've just created these named ranges. They're going to cover us for when we use our index and match. So just remember we have username, password, and email, user role. So those things are going to be important because we need to, once they put in a username, we need to check the password. So that's important. So back into the login screen, and let's go ahead and go into the design once again so we can take a look at that here, not the time clock here. So we have this particular cell, this particular field, I should say, tied to a specific cell. That is tied to B5. That's the control source. Login is the sheet. B5 is the cell. So that's important. We know when this is changed, it's going to affect B5. The password is connected to B6. Now you'll want to make sure that these columns are hidden and locked from your user so they do not have access to these cells. They cannot change this. So that is other than the admin, everybody else should be locked out of those. That's very important. That's why they're and also we have one more option, and that is the option box here, and that particular checkbox is controlled with B9. B9 is going to tell us because sometimes I want to remember, I don't want to enter my username every time. So if that's the case, we can select this checkbox and it's going to remember. So that's all you really need to know. We just have two buttons. One is the OK button, and when we double click the OK button, what's going to happen? We're going to run this macro called check user. And the close button, I suggest you do like something like this workbook close, but I'm going to comment that out or something like that. So you may want to close the workbook, but for our purposes, we're still in the testing phases, so we don't want to close the workbook really. So, but you may want to add something like that, and then whether you want to save the workbook probably or not, probably not, right? So you don't want to save it. So if this were commented out, right? If we took out that comment, the login form would hide and the workbook would close without saving in this case, but we're going to comment that out. We don't want that to happen, not especially not while we're testing, not until we get everything complete. But that just gives you an idea of what it will be in the future. For now, it's simply just hiding the form using the form name and then the word hide. It's going to hide our form and not do anything else. So this particular user form, really just three macros. One hides the bar, one runs a macro called check user, and the other one is going to hide the form. So let's go ahead and take a look at our only real macro that we have, and that's the check user. So that would be here under user login macros here. And we have it all the way up the top. Let's go ahead and say check user, not at the top, check user. We have that here, and let's go ahead and go over that. And so we walk through this particular macro to see how we've done it. All right, and also we want to pull up the login screen. That's going to tie, this login screen is going to tie directly to that. So we know already a few things. We know that B5 is tied specifically to our form. Remember, B5 is tied to this. So when we change this and we tab over, you're going to see B5 change also. Okay, so remember, those are connected. Same thing with the password. Password here. Oh, I forgot to show you one thing. I want to show you how we get those stars and not them. So let's close that out and go back into our user form, our login form here. And we click on the password field, and all the way down here, we'll see password character. You see down here, password character. I put a star in. If you want to use a different character, you can use a different character. I've used star, which is the most common, or asterisk, as we call it. So password character, that is how you get that is how we mask the password with a specific character. All right, so we've covered that. And let's go back into our login here sheet. So we've covered that. We know that the password name is connected. So we know as we add in the passwords and then we tab over, we know that our password is going to be here. These two columns, A and B, are going to be hidden, so nobody will see that. So that's important there. We can close that out. So we also know, let's go ahead and enter the password. I want to know, that's the correct password, 123. I want to know if it's a correct password or not. How do we know that? Well, we know the username and we know the password here. So using those two, we can figure out if it's right or wrong with this formula. Here's the formula. We're going to index the user password. That's what we're looking for. That's what we're looking for. And we're going to match it. What we're going to do is run the match. What are we matching? We're going to match the username, and we're going to match an exact match. So we want 0. We want to match the username with this named range here. I showed you that name range just a moment ago. So we're matching the username, and it's the first column in the index, meaning the user password, we're only indexing one column, so 1. And does it equal B6? B6 is the password that the user entered. So basically, we're going to locate the password in the table, and then we're going to check, does it equal B6? If yes, then it's true. That is the correct password. If it's not equal to B6, it's the wrong password, and we're going to put false. So it's a very simple formula to check it. So if I were to change this to DD, that's going to go to false because it is an incorrect password. And of course, if it's incorrect, we want the user to do something. What is the user type? We also need to know that. We can determine the user type by indexing and matching based on the user name. Of course, we're going to index, in this case, it's user type, which is also in that admin screen I showed you. And we're going to run a simple match, matching the username in B5 against the named range, username, and then we want an exact match. I should put a 0 in here. And then in that case, we want to match the column exactly, the index, the first column, because it's only one column. So in that case, admin is going to be, it's going to return our user type. We're going to need that user type because we need to show or hide specific sheets or specific ranges, perhaps based on this user type. So that's very important. Now, should we remember the username? This particular field is tied. Remember, B9 is tied to this option. Remember my username. So if we unselect it, it's going to go to false. If we select it, B9 is going to go to true. That's going to come in handy when we run our macro. The next up, I want to copy the login user. If we don't remember this username, this is going to disappear, but I need to know the username, so I'm going to copy this field in the macro to the logged in user so that we can always remember the logged in user, because we need to know that, and we've assigned that particular field app username. That's going to help us moving forward. Like when we want to send an email, we need to know who the email is coming from, and that's going to be this person, Randy. That is our logged in username, and of course our logged in user email. We're going to use that again. User email, we're going to index. We've already named the range over in our admin, and again, just a simple match using the user name. That'll return our user email. So that is how we get all that data. Now, what do we do with it? Let's go back into the macro and focus on our check user. In fact, let me close this out and bring the screen down just so you can get a look at both at the same time. We can reduce these just so you have the fields on the left so that we can look through. All right, so first of all, we're going to calculate. I want to make sure, just in case, I want to make sure to calculate because we've got a lot of formulas in here. I want to make sure they're all calculated first just to make sure. All right, so next up, first of all, we need to make sure that we actually have a username, a user type. So for example, B8, if B8 is empty, that would be an incorrect username because we're using a match, right? We're matching this, B5. So if the username is empty, we know for sure that this is going to be NA. It's not going to be blank. In fact, let me just wrap that on. I don't like errors. If error, I like to wrap them. Always like to wrap them. So let's go ahead and wrap them in an if error and put a blank there. And then we're going to do the same thing here just in case there is an error. We don't want errors because errors could create bugs in our code, but blanks will not. So if error, then we're going to wrap that into a blank space just like that. So we can test for blank spaces and we don't have any errors. Okay, so if for some reason it's an incorrect username, it's going to return just a blank space, and that's just fine. So if B8 value equals empty, then it's an incorrect username. Then we need to alert the user message box, please enter a correct username, and then we're going to exit the sub. We don't want to move forward. We don't want to even, I don't even want to close the user form. I just want to exit the sub so that the user has the opportunity to enter the correct username. Now what we need to do is we need to run a check. Assuming that there is a username, we need to check on the correct password. And we could do that using B7. If B7 does not equal 2, remember we focused on that formula, how to check for the correct password. So B7 will tell us true or false, false if it's not correct. So if it's not true, or we could also do equal to false, then it's an incorrect password. In that case, give a message box, please enter a correct password and exit the sub. We don't want to even close the user form, we just want to exit the sub. All right, now if they've passed these two tests, we know we have a right password and we have a proper username, so we can move forward. In that case, we can hide the login form, and we can also definitely set the user type to B8. That's going to set our user type. We need to know that moving forward because we need to run different macros based on this user type. So we need to set that, and in fact, we can then move on to our clearing the password. We want to clear the password. That's important. We always want to clear the password. So we've done that, and that's in B6. So we clear the password out. And next up, I want to clear the username in B5, but I only want to clear it if B9 is false. B9 is false means they have not requested to remember the username. So in that case, if B9 is false, then we're going to clear the content. So in this line here, if B9 equals false, then B5 clear the contents. That means the user has not requested us to preserve the username, and therefore we don't need to remember it, therefore we can clear it out. All right, next up we're going to run different macros, 4 different macros based on the user type. Sure, we could use a case here, but that would involve more lines. So this is pretty easy, just 4 different lines. If the user type is admin, then run this particular macro called user set as admin. If the user type is manager, run the macro called user set as manager. Same thing for user, and another one for time clock. So we've got 4 different macros that we've created based on the user type. We've also got a macro that's going to close our workbook. This is going to come in handy a little bit later on when we want to clear. When we want to log out, we want to close the workbook, but what I want to do is I want to make sure this login is the only one I want the user to see. So that means when they log in, they can see this. And all we have to do is click login. And the reason that we don't have the form pop up, there's some errors, especially if you download a workbook from the internet, maybe the macros will not be labeled. So it's always nice to start off having the user actually do something like click a button before they see the login. And that's going to be helpful so things don't run automatically. We may not running macros right away on start can cause issues. Maybe they're not enabled. And here you can put in like a little something. You could put in some words saying, you know, please make sure macros are enabled. So, you know, put a nice big message box or picture, something on that, because that's important. Because if they click the button and macros are not enabled, nothing is going to happen. So we want to make sure that's good. You know, you can probably do something nicer than this login. I just created it really fast because I had so much to do. But that gives you an idea. All right, so because when they close the workbook, here's what I want to happen. I want to activate sheet 14. And sheet 14, of course, is our login sheet right here. I want to activate this first. And the reason I want to activate it is because I can't hide all the other sheets. In other words, let's say I'm on admin right here and we want to close the workbook. I can't hide the admin screen while I'm on it. So we need to make sure that we're off of any sheet we're going to hide. So the best way to do that is to go to login and then hide all the other sheets. So you want to first go to the sheet, or activate, I should say, the sheet before we hide the other sheets. And that's super important. So we do that first, and then we're going to dimension worksheet as a worksheet. And then basically what we're going to say is, for each worksheet in this workbook of worksheets, I want you to hide everything except for the login screen, So we can do that with just a little bit of code. We can say, if the worksheet name does not equal login, then worksheet visible equals very. This is going to hide all of the worksheets. You can set it to very hidden or just hidden, either way, but they should be very hidden because you don't want users that don't have rights to easily unhide worksheets. So I would suggest very well hidden, especially for things like payroll and things like reporting, so the things that are very sensitive in nature. Okay, so that is our loop right there. It's going to go through, it's going to loop through every sheet in the workbook. The next step, we're going to save the workbook. We always want to save it. And then in that case, we would want to close it. We want to run it. But what we'll do is we'll run this close workbook. We can put this on the this workbook close event. So when we go ahead and deactivate it, or actually close it, we would go to workbook close event, or before close, I should say, right here, and then we're going to run that macro in here. But we're not really ready to do that yet. We're not ready to implement that yet, but that's what we would do. We would run this macro on close. So when the user closes it, it goes through that before the close. So that's the idea of it on that particular macro here. So start workbook, we want to make sure that sheet 14 is activated. It should be, but if for some reason the workbook got closed, let's say the workbook got closed without running that macro, you'd at least want to make sure 14 was activated, and you want to show the login form. That's important so that they can properly log out. You may want to run this loop again. It's possible just to hide them. So for example, if your workbook crashes or you save it and then it crashes, it might open up with certain things visible that you don't want because it didn't go through a proper close. So you may want to run a check that if certain worksheets are visible, we want to hide those worksheets before we actually run, just in case a different user logs in. So that's an idea. All right, the next up, start workbook. So we're going to start that and show the login. The next up is a log out. We have that button. Sheet 14, we're going to activate that. And again, we're going to run through all this. We really don't need both of these, but we'll decide one way or the other on those. But we don't, one's for close workbook, but if they log out, if they actually log out, we can do the same thing. Like for example, when we have the time clock, we click a log out, and it's going to actually save it and close it and get it ready for login next time. So that's another way to do it. So I thought that was going to be handy to be able to log out. We may add a log out button later on, so that's going to help us. So it gives the user to save it and close it and log out in just one swoop. So it's kind of nice to have that wrapped in a macro. All right, next up we have user rights. Now we went over this. Remember, we had just mentioned set as admin. These are the different macros that run are based on the user type. And I have just set these like temporarily, but I'm not really sure. We're not sure exactly what is, and you should set your own exactly as you want them. But basically what I did is I just decided to show a certain set of sheets and hide some other sheets. Admin, of course, would have, everything visible except maybe some other schedules. These should really be sheet. They're all visible, and this should probably be visible too, weekly schedule. These need to be visible for the admin. And this one too. So they're really all visible for admin. And then you can decide, once we get completed with this project, you can decide what sheets you have. It's very easy to change this, and I suggest you look these over and decide which sheets you want to hide and which sheets you want to show based on the role of the user based on the user type or role. So we have multiple ones. So that's all we did here. It's very, very simple. We just hide. The only important thing to remember is, one, you don't want to hide a sheet that you're active. So for example, the employee manager, the first thing we're going to show is this particular sheet, I suspect almost everybody will have visible, even a user. So this is sheet 1. So what I decided to do is to first of all make it visible, make sure it's visible, then activate this, because this, let's say this is the default screen that almost everybody will have access to. Then once the user's on this, then you can hide specific sheets because you know the users are not on that sheet. So that's why I've chosen to make sheet 1 visible and activate sheet 1 and then hide or show the others. So that's just how I've done this. And of course for Timeclock, what I've done is I've hidden all the sheets except for Timeclock. That would be for a dedicated machine where only Timeclock is a sheet that you want. And in that case, we're going to hide all the worksheets other than Timeclock. And then J13 is select. That means that is our default where the employee IDs are going to be entered, which is J13, so I want that selected. So when they click on the time clock, J13, we want to make sure that J13 is selected. That means it's ready to go and ready to receive employee ID numbers. So for the time clock screen, that might be a nice handy feature, so you have one specific machine dedicated for time clock, and that way you can have its own unique user ID, which is going to be helpful. All right, moving on, we've covered our user rights. Let's go back into the admin, and now let's take a look at our event notifications right here. Now, once again, the idea and the premise of this events notifications is to set up some defaults for both the email notifications and for the pop-up notifications. And what we, in this way, the reason is we set up defaults is that we don't need to set up a brand new email to attachment, subject, and message for every single event that we create. That's a little big. So that we can have defaults so that when we do select, let's say we create a new event, when we do select a specific leave event, we automatically get some information here within the email too, and then we can adjust this subject, message, attachments based on the specific leave event. But at least we have a starting point, because we may be creating a lot of different events, and we want to have a starting point or a default notification for both. And also we have the pop-up leave. It simply is a simple pop-up that we can set them in the admin screen. So the reason is we set up a default so that as soon as we select a specific event type, we can automatically have that information. And I've made that so that we can set that up just on for new. It's not on existing. So when we change an existing, the existing event type and existing subject, message all remain. It's only for new. This way we don't erase anything that we may have already saved. It's only for the new ones. All right, so that is the purpose of it. So let's go back into the email and the admin event notifications tab and see how we did that. We're going to go into the developers, and the first thing we're going to do is we're going to start off. The idea is that when we select a specific and previously saved event notification below, it shows up above, and that's pretty consistent with our application here. And to do that, we've done, of course, conditional formatting. We have our selected row, and we have that right here in B507. So we've created some conditional formats based on this number. So when we select a different row, that number changes. So when we go into the conditional formatting, we will see under the home, conditional formatting, and manage rules, we'll see that we just have two rules. One is for the alternate row coloring, as we have blue or white, and the other is for the selected row. Here we have a rule here, and we want, basically I want that under two conditions. One, I want to make sure there's actually a value in column D, and I want to make sure that it is part of that row that we've selected. So those are going to be the two conditions in which we color this. So let's go ahead and edit the rule and take a look at the rules. And the rules are twofold. We have two conditions, so we use and the row, the selected row must be B and 507. That's one rule. The second rule is D and 521 must not be blank. And why do we use 521? 521 is the first row in our conditional that applies to, and make sure that we've taken the $ out of before 520, but it's only in the columns. We do not want to be before the row, so we want that always to remain constant, and we do not want, we need to make sure the row is relative, and then the column is constant, so that's important. So remember this 521, so when we cancel out of that and we take a look, we'll see that our conditions also start in 521, so those two must match in order to maintain this conditional formatting. And of course, in the alternate row, there's also two conditions. We're going to edit that rule. We want to color alternate rows, but I only want to color alternate rows when they contain a value in D. So once again, D521, again, no absolute reference on the row. No $ there. We want that to remain dynamic. And of course, mod row 2 equals 0. So that's going to color all of the even rows. So you'll see here 522, 524, 526. Those are rows with even numbers. Those are going to be colors, and the others are going to remain white. So those are the two conditions. That's why only those rows with data are going to be colored, and only those rows with data are going to be selected. So if we were to select add some value here, automatically gets colored, and automatically you are able to select it. However, as soon as we clear that value, both of those conditions remain invalid. So that's how we cover the conditional formatting. We've covered that before in some videos, but I wanted to bring you up to speed on that. All right, the other thing is through VBA, when we select a specific row, we want that data to load in here. We want to take all of the data, and we're going to use data mapping to do just that. And we're going to go over data mapping. And the idea with data mapping is, if you look down here below, this is very important. We have here data on the sheet. So if you'll see here, notifications map G507. So when we look to G507 here, we see that that's the event type, right? So G507, the event type, is in this column. So for each column, we want to put the actual field where it's mapped, the actual field this way. So E507 is going to be email 2. Email 2 is E507. And we've done that for every single field. Keep in mind that this is a merged cell covering two different columns, so keep that in mind. And this as well, this is also a merged cell covering two different columns, so we want that as well. And of course, here with this pop-up notification, this is a group. I've created a group, and the reason I've created a group is because I need to hide this group when we select another tab. When we select this tab, I want to show that group. So this particular group, it's a group of shapes, and I've named that group of shapes notification group right here. Here's the name, notification group. So you'll see within VBA, I'm going to hide that group when I select any other tab, and it's going to display when it's event notifications. How do we know it's event notification? Well, this particular column is column 9. Column 9. This is column 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. So we know that when column 9 has been selected to show the event group. And the event group includes various shapes such as the icons here, the shape here, and the delete. And this shape is very simple. It's a button. And this is a little picture that I've imported. Just searched Google and found this little pin button there. And this is a simple shape. It's a folded corner shape. It's one of the shapes that you can find under the insert shapes here. And that's just the insert, the folded corner. I believe it's somewhere down here under folded corner. It's right here. And this folded corner, all I've done is reversed it. So when I select that folded corner, all I've done is reversed it like this, so that I can reverse it, and then I've given it a color of yellow. So that's how we create that little note. It's a really nice little feature, and then we've just given it a color, you know, a light color like this. So that's all I've done to create that. And now, how do I apply the text? Well, what I've done in this for the sample is I've selected the shape here, and then I've put a formula on that of E508. So I want it to equal that cell, which is right here. I508 cell. So anything we've been changed here. So if we just say from, and then we say username, right? Let's see, username here. That's the right field. It's automatically, as soon as we change here, it's automatically going to be displayed in this note. Now this is just a sample, right? Sample. When the actual data is changed, it's going to be in the form, in the actual pop-up itself, and these data labels are all going to be replaced with actual data because these are dynamic field names. So we put those in so they're changed so we know who has created it and all the details that we want, and it's fully flexible. Now I've also created it so as soon as we make a change, assuming it's already been saved, it's going to make the change right here. So for example, if I change this, if I add an attachment here, and I click an attachment here, and I just click any file here, it's automatically going to be saved in the file below. You'll see right here, it's been added right here. Automatically here. So it's automatically, so any change is automatically saved. Now let's go into the VBA, and we've got a few things to show you. We're going to show you how to go through the macros. So let's start with the on sheet macros. Those are the macros that run on the sheet itself. So into the Developers tab, under Visual Basic, and we're looking for the admin sheet. The admin sheet, we're looking for on sheet macros, which is right here, admin sheet. Now we've got some macros that happen on selection change, right? We have some things when we select, we want something to happen. So let's go ahead and take a look at that particular macro and see how we went about it. Did that. Select notifications to load on cells above. It's this macro right here. All we're doing is saying if we select a cell, any cell between 521 and L541, then do something. Not intersect is nothing. When those two cancel each other out, meaning if the user selects that their target is within this range, then do something. But there's one more thing. And what? D and the target row must not be empty. Why is that? D, if I select something that has it, if I select something in the range, but D has nothing, we don't want it. There's nothing going to happen. There's nothing here. Only when we select something where D contains a value do I want to load that particular event notification. So that's the only time I want it, when D contains it. So we need to make sure that D contains a value as well. So those are the two conditions. The user has selected something, and remember, this is under selection change, right? This is only for selection change. Worksheet change is up here, so we'll get to that in just a moment. So let's go ahead and maximize this a little bit, bring it out a bit. So when that happens, what do we want to do? Well, I want two things. The first thing I want to do is I want to take whatever row and put it into 507. Whatever row we've selected, I want to put it in 507. Of course, that is the row that we just discovered. We need to know that row for a few reasons. Because when I make a change here, I need to know what row to save it back to, so I need to know that row. And I also need this row for the conditional formatting that colors this blue, dark blue back with a white font. So there's really two purposes for this notification row, so we need to put that there. So that's the first thing. The second thing is I want to run a macro called notification load. And what that's going to do is load that notification using the macro with all the details up here. So that's a very simple macro. We're going to go over that in just a moment. But there's a few other things that I want to show you on this worksheet change. And that's with the change. So worksheet change. Now we're going to go to worksheet change. And that means when the user actually makes a change. And we focused on custom field before, so we've done that, but now we're going to focus right on here, on change of existing notifications, update the table below, and not on notification load, That means when we select something, there's changes up here, right? Every time we select, there's changes, right? But that kind of change, that type of change, I don't want to save back to the table. Otherwise, we create a loop that goes on forever. So there's two types of change. This type of change, where there's something changing in those cells, but then there's another type of change. There's this type of change here, where the user says, right? That type of change I do want saved. So when we select out and back in, I want that change to save in the table below. That type of change. Now, how can we differentiate between? Well, what I can use is called notification load. When I select here, I'm going to mark B506 to false. I'm going to mark B506, which is currently false. I'm going to mark it as true temporarily while it's loading. And then it's pretty quick. It's too quick for you to see it by eye, but it goes from true to false very, very quick. And when that happens, nothing changes. When there's change here, if this is true, nothing gets saved back to the table. So we want to make sure if this is true, that means while we're loading, don't change anything back to the table. So we need to check, make sure that B506 is false. We're going to run that check as well right here. B506 equals false. So that's one condition we need to make sure. The second condition is if a user makes a change to any of these cells. They make a change. And these are all of the cells within that range, within that notification. They're all these cells in white here. All of these cells. So we've got 4, 5, 6, a total of 7 cells here. If there's a change to any of those cells, then we want to save it back to the table. And we also need to make sure that it is not a new notification. New notifications only get saved when the user presses save. So when we click new notification, let's say we make a change, there's no row to save it to, right? So we need to make sure we save it all at the same time. So new notifications do not. So there's another condition. It must be, 508 must be false also. Okay, so that's really important. So we're going to go over that. And here we go, scroll over, and 508 must be false, right? Why is that? Because it must be on existing, not a new, not a update to existing notifications. Let me just put in parentheses, not new. Okay. So there's those 3 the conditions. 1, it must not be loading. 2, it must be an existing record previously saved. In that case, then do something. Then we need to set the rows. I need to dimension the row and the column. I need to save, assuming that both of those conditions are false. Any changes on here must get saved down to here. All right, so we have to save those down here. So how can we do that if it's an existing? So when we click here, I need to make sure that those changes are saved down here. So how do we do that? Because what I need to do is make sure when we make a change here, I need that automatically saved down here in the table below. So I need to know, 1, I need to know the row, and I need to know which column. So this, I need to know right now this, if you look here, this is column 5, right? I need to know it's column 5 that we changed it in. And I need to know that the email to, in this case it's column 5, but for example, let's say event type equals column, right? I need to know that the event type, in this case, it's 4, right? 4. I need to know that this is column 4 to save it in column 4. And I need to know what row to save it in. The row is easy, it's right here, but what column? We use that with event mapping. So for example, email to is column 5. Event type is column 4. What's BCC? BCC is right here, so that would be 6. 4, 5, 6, 7. Attachments are 7. So how do we get those columns? We know the row, and we just need the column. We use data mapping. And what I know is, I know this is column 5, right? But if I move 20 columns over, I can map that data. Here's column 25. Column 25, right? So if I put the column where we need to go right here, if I put the column exactly 20 columns to the right, exactly 20 columns. Do you understand that? It's kind of hard. I know it's kind of difficult. Right. So let's go over that one more time because data mapping is not simple, but it's very easy and very important. I make a change here. I need this change saved here, right? I make a change here. I need this change here, right? I know the row. We know the row to save it. We know it's going to go in 524. The row's here. But what column? Because everyone's different. This is column 4. This is column 5. So, for example, event type. How do I know? Where am I going to get the 4 from? I need to get the 4. I need to know, okay, so why don't I put the 4 exactly 20 columns to the right? I'll put the same row, right? 507. I'm going to put that 4 20 columns to the right. So if this is column, let's look at this one. This is column 7 equals column 7, right? So that means in column 27, I'm going to put a 4. So here's column 27 equals column. So that means, right, 27 contains a 4. So I just need to look exactly 20 columns to the right and find the number here. And then I know the column to save it in. And I've done that with each of the fields. Each of these fields have a column. And this can be hidden, so I know to pull the 4 exactly. So I can say in our code, okay, the column equals the current row plus the current column plus 20. What is in that column? The current row, the current column plus 20. What is in that cell? Well, in that case, it's 4. So then I take that 4, I take this, so then I say, okay, with row 521, with column 4, put in whatever the change was, whatever the target. So we do that, and I'll walk you through the code right now. It's very, very simple in the code. That's why it's very simple. So let's go up to back into where we were again in the admin right here, and worksheet change. Now, so we know the notification row. Where is that? That's in B507. So we got the row. We know the row. That's very easy. It doesn't change. But what about the column? The column is cells, right? There's no period because we're on the sheet. Remember, we don't need to specify a sheet because we're working with code on the sheet. When we work inside a macro, we must always specify the sheet. But we don't need to specify a sheet because we're working inside the sheet. So we know the sheet. The target row, remember it's in the row, plus the target column plus 20. This right here, this is going to be that number 4. That's going to be the 4. So now we know the row. Now we know the column, which is 4. The column is 4. Now all we need to do is say cells, the row, and the column value equals the target value. So that's how we do data mapping. And this applies to every single cell, all 7 of those cells that we change for existing. So the 3 conditions: if the user makes a change, if it's not loading, we want to make sure it's not loading, and if it's an existing, that means not a new event, then do the following. Then do this. Dimension the row and the column is long. Get the row from B507. Get the column from 20 columns over to the right, and then take that, the row and the column, and make it equal to whatever the target value, whatever the user just changed. And that's how we can do it, so that when we make a change here, let's take out these SS, automatically it's going to change in row 521, column 4, it's going to make that. So that is how we do the data mapping. Okay, so now we know how we save this data to the table, but now let's focus on a few different macros called new notification, deleting a notification, saving it. So there's actually 4 different macros. Now there's 2 buttons. All we need on existing records. This is an existing record. It's been saved. So there's really only 2 possibilities for a user. They can A, create a new notification, or B, delete the existing one. That's 2. But when they're on a new notification, the buttons change. Now they have 2 options. Now they have 2 choices. They can save this notification, or they can cancel the new. That button needs to be a little bit bigger. It's a little bit small. All right. So, and this is a little bit big. So we can move those over so we can see that. Everything got extended a little bit, so you get the idea. So we've got cancel new, and we've got the ability to cancel it. So those are the 4 different macros. That's only 4 different macros. And then what we've done is we've assigned those macros to these buttons and the groups of buttons here. Let me get that. They're grouped together, as you can see, which is what we want. Now the groups here is this. Let's create that, make that to the right a little bit. All right, so now we're good. It's already there. All right. And so what we can do is we can also format the shapes and test the buttons. So in case that we need a little more space, we can go into the text box and we've got point. We can change it to 0.02. That's going to give us a little more spacing there, so we've got enough in case we don't have a lot of room. All right. So we've saved this as a group and called this new notification group, this group of buttons. And the other one is called existing notice. So when we cancel this, it's going to bring back the others. So these 2 are called, this group of these 2 buttons is called existing notification group. So there's really 2 specific conditions. It's either going to be in the new state or an existing state, like 2 states. When if it's in an existing state, we're going to show the new button and the delete. If it's in a new state where the user's ready to put in a new, it's going to be the 2 buttons, cancel new and save notifications. I guess we could just use cancel, but that's okay. Either way, so we have both of those. And so let's go into the VBA and look over just those 4 macros so we can give you an idea of what's going on. Into the Visual Basic, now we have created a new module called admin event notification, admin event notification. So we double click on there. We've got some macros. We got save, which we looked at. We have load, which we saw when we selected the row before. We have add new. We have cancel new, which is just one line. We have delete. And then, of course, we have the add email attached. That's just a little macro. All that does is going to put that entire file name in sheet 4 range G508. So that's all that's going to do. All right, so let's go ahead and go with loading, because we saw this one already, and it involves data mapping as well. Once again, we need the column and we need the row, so we're going to dimension both of those as long. And the idea that when we're loading is what I'm going to do is I'm going to go down here, I'm going to run through all of these columns here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through this cell. I'm going to say G507 equals whatever, let's say we've selected this one, termination. G507 equals termination. E507 equals employee email. E508 equals nothing, you know. So we're going to go through columns 4 all the way to column 11. This is a skip. This is column 9 and 10 and 11. So we're going to skip 10 because 10 is nothing. These are merged cells. So we're going to go right to 11 equals column, just so you can see that. That's column 11. Okay, so we want to show that. So we want to know exactly what columns are what. So we can see, we're going to go through each one of these. We're going to pull this mapped range. We're going to take that, figure out what it is. Okay, so we know that in D511, we need to put this, dear employee. In D511, we know to put that. That's how we know it. So we can do that with just a very quick loop. We're going to loop. We're going to go from column 4 all the way to 11, skipping 10, taking whatever's here in 542, row 542, and whatever column, and using that range to bring up that information. So let's go through the code and see just how we did that. Dimension notification column is long and notification row is long. We're going to need both of those. Again, our row is going to be located in 507, so for some reason that is empty, we need to exit the sub. We do need a row, so in case any reason that's empty, exit the sub. Otherwise, set the notification row as B507. That's a static row, so we know we're good to go. Remember, we've added B507 before we run this macro. Let's look at that. Let's look at that over in the admin again, just so we know on selection change. In the admin here, selection change, we've added the target row to B507 before running the load macro. So it's already going to be there. So that's really important. All right, next up, we've set the notification row. Now we're going to run our loop. And it's just a very simple one-line loop, 4 to 11, and we're going to skip 10. We need to make sure that notification column is not 10. Remember, we use merge cells. So in this case, if it's 10, we're going to do nothing. So we're going to go from 4 to 11. And first, what I need to do is I need to find the range, that range. What is the cell that we're going to be affecting? What is the cell that we're going to make the change? Well, that cell is located in row 542 notification column. We went over that just a minute ago. 542 in the column. So it's going to go 4, 5, 6, and it's going to pull these ranges each and every time. Okay, so back into the code. So we need to get that range. And once we know that range, we can say the range. Now, the range, of course, this is with sheet 4 with the admin. So that's why we have the dot range, because we're already assuming it's sheet 4 here. With this range, what are we going to do? We are going to determine the cells, the row, the notification row, whatever row we set, and the column, the value, that value, we're going to take that value, we're going to bring it and put it in right in this range. And we're going to do that for each of the cells, each all the way from 4 to 11, skipping 10. And the comment here is load the row values using data mapping. That's how you're using data mapping. So we can load a lot of cells very, very quickly. All right, next up, we know it's no longer a new notification. So we need to set 508 to false. It's no longer a new. 508 is right here. And it says new notification. We need to make sure that's set to false, because it's for sure if we've clicked on it. So for example, if we click a new notification, right now it's true, but if we click an existing, we need to make sure that B508 goes back to false, and that way changes get saved. So we need to make sure, so we set that back to false. And also we need to make sure that our button sets, we've got 2 button sets, one for existing and one for new. Of course, The one for existing we want to show, and the one for new we want to hide. So we're going to use those two lines of code. All right, so that's the load and hide. Next up, we have add new. The macro, this is the macro that's been assigned to the button add new. So just once again, when we right click on here, anywhere in there, assign the macro, we'll see that the macro that's been assigned is add new, notification add new. All right, so that's this macro we assigned. So let's go ahead and see just how we built that macro and what we need to do. The first thing we want to do is we want to set B506 and B508 to true. Why both? We know B508 is for new, so that's important. But what's B506? B506 tells us that we're going to load. And when we're loading, that means no changes are going to take place. For example, let's say I have here our job. When we have a new one, we want to clear these cells out, right? Because it's going to be new. But what if I delete this? Let's watch right here, this BCC right here. If I delete that, right, it's going to get deleted here. And I don't want that to happen when we clear this out. So if we mark this true, right, and then we have something in here, it's not going to load, but then let's mark it to false first. Okay, so let's put an email in. We're going to have it change. Okay, so now we have admin here, but what if I mark this to true, set it to true, then I clear it out? Then those changes are not going to be made. So I want to make sure that when we clear this out, no changes are made in the table below. And we can do that by marking B506 as true. So that's important. So we've done just that. And of course, before the macro ends, we're going to mark this back to false. So B506 and B508 set to true. B508 will remain true until we save it. Now we're ready to clear out. So I'm going to clear all of those cells that are based on that. So we're going to clear. That just clears all of those cells. Next up, we need to set our button sets. The existing, it's no longer an existing, it's new. So we need to hide our existing button set. And of course, the new one we need to show. So this line is going to show those new buttons. We're going to set B506 back to false. Once we've set it to true, we've made all of our changes. We can set this back to so that any changes do get saved in the table below. So we're going to set the notification load back to false. In E507, we're just simply going to select that as the first cell we want the user to enter. So it'll select that automatically so that they are ready to enter a value into the email. So that is how we do that. That's the add new. It's a very simple macro, and that's, of course, all with sheet 4. That's the only sheet we're focusing on. All right, next up, we've covered load, we've covered add new. We're going to cover cancel new. Now, the idea is very simple. When we're in the new state, if the user decides they don't want to add a new one, basically what I want to do is just select the first available cell. Now, if they're assuming that there is events, if there's no events, we don't want we want them to enter one. So we don't want to get out of this new state if there are no events created. But if there are, all we need to do is just have them select the first one. And when they select this first one, it goes all the way back to load. So when we have a new, all we need to do is when we click the cancel new, all I'm going to do is select this one, D521, because as soon as we select it, it's going to load whatever's in that first row. So that's all we need to do actually in the macro for the cancel. If sheet 4 D521 does not equal empty, that means there is an event saved. If there is an event saved, the value is not equal, then sheet 4 D21 select, and I didn't use with sheet 4 because it's just one line of code here. So sheet 4 select, all we're going to do is select D21, and that automatically will load the event in the fields above. So cancel is really new. Delete, we also have the ability to delete, and again what we need to do is first in this dimension both the notification and the last row, and this one's a little bit more complicated because in this case, what I want to do is let's say I want to delete review, right? I'm going to delete it. Actually, let me copy some values over, and I'm going to create a duplicate of this just because I want to show you what it looks like when we delete. So what I want to do, and normally you won't have specific duplicates, but in this case I want to create a duplicate because it's the fastest way. Okay, so what I've done is I've just created two of the same. Now I want to delete this one, but if I clear this out, I don't want an empty row, right? I don't want an empty row. I don't want to delete the row because we can't delete. We got way too much here. We just can't. We shouldn't be deleting rows at this point because we've got a lot going on. We've got a lot of conditional formats. We really want to just clear the row out, clear it out, and then I want to take all of these names and I want to move them up one level. So that's what we want to do in here. I just want to take these values here and I'll move them all up one. That's it. Just want to basically, I want to do like this, move them up one. So that's what I want to do in the macro. But if it's the last row, if the user is deleting the last row, then we don't need to do anything, right? They just delete it. So let's go ahead and look at that and see how we did that. In some cases, deleting is fine, but in this case, we're just clearing it out. So first we need an OK, we need a confirmation. If B507 is empty, that means there is no row, so there's nothing to do, right? If there's not even a row to delete, then we're just going to exit. Now, assuming that B507 does have a value, we need to set a message box. Are you sure you want to delete this notification? Yes or no, right? That's the type of pop-up we want, right? So when we delete it, right, we want that yes or no. I want those two buttons to come up. And so if the user says yes, then delete it. If they say no, then don't do anything. So, and then the title of this is going to be called delete notification. Maybe you didn't miss that. If we click delete, we'll see the title here, delete notification. That's the title. So we can put any title we want there. So now we're going to say if it's equal to no, if the user has said no, then exit the sub. If, it starts out if, right? Remember, if the message box meaning the result. If it's no, then exit the sub. That means the user has clicked no. So that means we don't need to do anything else. We don't need to move farther. Okay, now if we get down to below this, that means they've said yes. The notification row, we can set that into B507. Course. And now we're ready to delete. D, starting with row D and moving all the way to L using the notification row. We're going to clear the contents. What that's going to do is start at D and go all the way to L and just clear those contents. Okay, clear them. And then what I want to do is I want to determine the last row, and then I'm going to take the second, the current row, whatever row we're on, plus one, plus the last row. I'm going to copy those. I'm going to take a value and bring them up. Just bring them up, and then I'm going to clear the last row out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy these rows like this, copy, and then I'm going to paste the values right here like that, and then I'm going to clear out the last row. So that's what we're going to do, but within the code. So first we need to determine the last row. We can use D541 and XLF. That'll get us our last row of values. Now we need to make sure, is the current row, are we trying to delete the last row? If we're deleting the last row, then we don't need to move on any farther. Okay, so that's it. If the last row is greater than the notification row, then it's not the last row. Then it's not the last row. Then do the following. Otherwise, no. Otherwise, it is the last row and we don't need to do anything. So there's just two things we need to do. The D in the notification value, the notification row, D, and through L and the last row minus 1. The last row minus 1 equals, so again, what we're going to do is we're going to say this. So let's say we delete this one. We're going to say this row, all the way, this equals this here, the current row, plus 1 up from the last row here, equals what? Equals this. So that's how we need to do it. Equals 1 down plus the last row. So that's how we do it in the code. Equals the notification row, the row that we cleared out, plus 1 through L in the last row. And that's going to move all the values up 1 row. Then all we need to do is clear the last row with that. So the last row just gets cleared. So that's how we move everything up 1 row and delete or clear the content. So we can do that just with a macro. And we'll go ahead and show you. So when we do that, let's say we select this and we click delete, and then we say yes, it's going to move everything up 1 row just like that. So that's how it's done. All right, let's take a look at what else we got here. We have save. Let's look at save. The last one for this is save. When we save it, we want to basically take all of these values and put them in a new row on this table. But the first thing is we need to make sure if we try to save and review, if I add new notification and put in test, I don't want to, we already have review here. I don't want to have more than one. We only want to have one default email message and one pop-up note per event type. Now, of course, in the events here, we can create multiple ones, right, for every different event, but I only want one default per type. Each default has one type. Excuse me, each type has one default. All right, so we do need to make a check to make sure. So if we try to save this, we need a pop-up that says, hey, the event type has a notification. Please select that notification to edit it. It just means you cannot save it unless it's an original, if it's already in the table, we can't save that event type. And that's important. We don't want multiple defaults for the same event type. Of course, you can create more event types. There's no problem with that. And then you can create more defaults. All right, so we do need to run that check, and we can do that here. And first of all, we need to make sure that G507 is not empty. We need to make sure that there is an event type. We can't save it if it's empty. So we need to run a check to make sure G507. If it's empty, then we need to put please enter an event type, select G507 and exit the sub. So we'll get out right there. And the other check is to make sure that if it's a new notification, we need to just double check that. And then if B509 equals existing, what is the existing? Then check for existing. Let me show you. That's a formula we have used. 509 here. You see this? This is a formula. What I want to do is, first of all, I want to check to make sure it's a new. If B508 equals true, this is an and, there's multiple conditions. Yes, it's a new. It's got to be new. And the count, what are we counting? We're counting all the existing types, and we're going to count how many instances of G507. How many instances are there of the event? And we need to, if it's greater than 0, if the count is greater than 0, then it's existing. That means it's already existing. If it's not, then it's new. So in this case, review is already in the table, so it's counting at 1. Oh, let's click that. So in this case, review is already there, so let's click put back in review. So it's going to say existing. But what if I change this to something we don't have? We don't have discipline yet. So in this case, it's new because discipline is not located in this list, and therefore it returns new because the count is not greater than 0. So in that case, it is new. So I need to know to make sure that we're going to check. If this says existing, we know it already exists, and we need to get out and not allow the user to save it. However, it says new, we are okay. So we're going to run that check. It's going to say if, here it is right here, if B509 equals existing, then put in this message box, this event type already has a notification. Please select a notification to edit it. That means it's already in the table below and exit the sub. So we're not going to allow the user to move on if it already exists in the table below. All right, next up, now we're ready to go. Okay, we've passed the 2 tests, and now we can set the notification row to D541. That's the last possible row. D541 is the last possible row, and then we're going to find the first available row, which is the last row of data plus 1. In this case, it would be 527. So we'll do just that. D541, the last row with data, plus 1 is going to be the first available row. All right, else, just in case the user gets in a situation where they're saving it, else if it's not true, right? If it's not true, that means in existing, we're just going to set the notification to B507. I don't necessarily think there'll be an instance where they're clicking save without it's already actually new, but just in case, we've set both conditions. Just in case it's existing, it'll show up here. We can set the row to B507 if it is not, if it's false, that means it's not a new notification. All right, so now we need to add the data to the table. We can use the same exact data mapping that we did before. Just as we had said, I mentioned, for notification column equals 4 to 11. If the notification does not equal 10, then the cells rows, we can take the notification row and the notification column and put that right in there. In this case, cells 542. This here is the range. Remember, 542 is the row, and the column, that is this right here. 542, G507. So when we save it, I'm going to run, and I'm going to look for whatever is in here. I'm going to pull this, and I'm going to put it right here in the row. I'm going to take whatever's in this, I'm going to put it here. Whatever's in E508, I'm going to put it right here. Whatever's in G508, I'm going to put it right here. So we're going to run through this loop. We're going to check to see what's here, and we're going to put it right in the first available row. So we're going to run the reverse loop using data mapping. So we've got that covered right there. It's very simple. And next up, of course, we need to reset our shapes. It's now no longer a new, so we're going to set the existing notification group to true, and we're going to hide the new notification group. All right, and B508 is going to set that to false. It's no longer a new notification, so we need to make sure that we set it as false. That is how we run it. So now we know how to save it. We know how to load our notifications. We know how to add new, cancel new, delete, and of course add the email attached in this little macro right here. So we've covered all of the specific macros on this particular sheet. So we've got that covered. Last but not least, let's move into the events, where we can actually run our macros so we can check for events, so we can check and automate the email and notification process. So we show you how we do that. And basically what I want to do is this. I want to check all of our events. I want to let's make that a little bit smaller. It's okay that the dates don't show up here. Let's bring them out a little bit just so we can see. Basically what I want to do is I want to find all of the events. If this is yes, right? They have to have a reminder. We have to set the reminder. That means the user does want a reminder, and this has to be blank, right? We need to make sure that if it's already been reminded, we don't need to worry about that, right? So we're just going to be focused on those that contain yes, and we can do that with an advanced filter. So I've created an advanced filter up here, and so I've put that in here. So there's a few conditions. Now what I want to do is I want to run this macro every single day, and I want to run it as many times a day as necessary at a specific time. So I want to, but I'm only focused on, now we have set reminder for. This is the third condition. Set reminder for, this is for specific days and times. We went over how this gets created. So this is the specific date and time that our reminder is supposed to run. That could be a pop-up, it could be an email, or it could be both. So 3 conditions. The reminder must be set. The reminder on must not have a value. If it's already been reminded, we're not concerned about that. And the third condition is we want a reminder that's equal to today's date or less. For example, if we came back over the weekend and there's 2 reminders that should have gone out but that didn't go out, we need to know about those. So we need to know the current day today, or actually let's just say yesterday, tomorrow -1, right? So anything like that before. So that's really important. So I want to run that. So those are the 3 conditions, and we can use those in our results filter. So we need to run an advanced filter. I need to know that the reminder is yes. I need to know that the reminded on must equal blank. Reminded on must equal blank, right? If it's already been reminded, we're not concerned about that. And it has to be less than. It has to be less than tomorrow. For example, today's the date that I'm recording. It's December 17th. So I need to be less than tomorrow. And why is it less than? Why not just equal today? Because if it's today, right, it's not going to involve times. It's got to be less than tomorrow. For example, today, let's say today's time could be December 17th at 5 p.m., right? So it can't just equal December 15th. It's got to be less than tomorrow. So less than tomorrow is really what we want. And that'll include anything today. That'll include at any time today. So not only on today's date, but at any time today, as long as it's less than tomorrow's date. So I'm going to use that, less than tomorrow's date, and I'll show you how we do that in the code. And next, once any values that do, we're going to run that. So for example, when I run the macro, let's go ahead and go into that and run the macro. But I don't want to send the emails just yet. So let's take a look inside the macro, and we have notification macros. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to comment out the code here and here. These are the emails. I don't want the emails to run just yet. So actually, I got a better idea. Why don't we just mark them as, yeah, that's good. Let's do that. So just because I don't want the emails and the pop-up to run, because I want to run a lot of them, and I don't want to. So I'm going to comment, this is for the email to send, and this is for the notification. We're going to go over that in just a moment. So let's go ahead and comment those out, And so I can show you exactly how we're going to do that. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back into the employee list here, and I'm just going to clear out some of the send on dates. So there's the reminders. So let's go ahead and delete those. We're going to delete those 4. And now when we click check notification, it's going to create all the notifications that meet those instances. All of the reminders that contain yes in the reminders. Let's go ahead and update, which is here. All the ones that contain yes. All the reminders that are less than December 18th. So all of the ones that are set here, set reminder for less. So these all are less than December 18th, including December 17th. And the reminder on equals blank, right? So, and this reminder on must be blank. So those are the 3 conditions. Now we've returned it. Okay, so now what I need to do is now I want to sort them. I want to sort them with the earliest first all the way to the latest. Now let's say we have 10 notifications set for today. Let's say we have 10 all in the same day, and they're going to be all down here. I only want to run the ones in which are either on the current time or before. And if it's not, if it's at a later time, I want to schedule it. For example, let's say this is December 17th. Right now it's 8:00 p.m. But what if it was 10 p.m., right? I wouldn't want this to run just yet. I want it to run at 10 p.m. So how do we get this to run at 10 p.m., right? I don't want to do anything else. I just want this to run at 10 p.m. So, but for all of the others, I need them to run now, but this one I want to schedule at 10 p.m. So how would we go about doing that? And let's go ahead and walk through the code and see just how we did that. So the idea is to run all of them before the current time, if there are any, and the next one scheduled. But the first thing what I need to do is I need to sort these. So whatever comes in the list, it's not going to be sorted. I need to sort them from the earliest to the latest. That's the most important. So let's go ahead and within the code and just see how we did that. I've commented out a lot of code here because we don't want anything to happen. I just want to show you specifically. The first thing I want to do is I want to check the notifications. What I would do is I want to run that advanced filter based on those conditions. And we're focused on sheet 7. Of course, that's the events list. All right, that's the events list, and we need the event row is long and the last row is long because I'm going to need to run the advanced filter. So I need to know, of course, the last row of the events. In this case, it's 25. But we're going to start here. We're going to run our advanced filter through all of these, and so we need to focus on that. So we will. So we need to get those both as long. This should be as long also. Okay. So now we've got those as long, all in separate rows. So now we're ready to enter our criteria. We focused on that. Remember, CA2 is yes. CA2, we have to make sure that they do want a reminder. CA2 all the way over here must be yes. The next up, set reminders for us. Less than tomorrow. Less than tomorrow, in fact. That's why I got to set that up. Less than, for CD2, the date, the current date plus 1. That's the same thing as tomorrow. Okay, so the current date plus 1. It's got to be less than that. That's very important. And then, of course, CE2, I'm only looking for blank, so we're just using the equals inside the advanced filter criteria. It's going to get us only those with blank values, and that's going to be put in CE2. Next up, I want to clear any previous results. We need to make sure that this table is clear, so we want to clear all of that data out. And just make sure it's all clear, all the way actually to CW. CW, all the way from CA to CW. So we're going to clear out those records, CA5, and I just chose a large number here. That's going to clear any previous results. The next up, I want to get the last row of the current table. Just as you in column A999 end XLab, that's going to get us our last row. We need that because we've got to run the advanced filter. And our advanced filter is going to start out with the data A4. It must include those headers. A4, 4 is our header row. All the way through AQ is the last column in our data. It's the last column all the way here. So it must include that all right here. Q is our last column. And so we need that, and that's very important. So let's go ahead and no, it's got to be AB. Sorry, AB. Let's fix that. That is incorrect. AB. Okay, so AB is the last column in our table. I thought that was wrong. And the last row. So that is the table. It still runs just fine, but you get the idea. So the last That's our initial table, and we're going to run an advanced filter, and we want to copy that. We want to copy that over, and we need to set some criteria. What's the criteria? Criteria is going to be CA1 all the way to CE2. It must include the headers. Let's look at that. Our criteria is right here. CA1 must include the headers all the way to CE2. So this is our criteria range right here. We're going to set that. And of course, we need our results range. Our results range are going to be from CA4 all the way over to actually going to be CW. These two I'll show you what they mean. It's going to go all the way to CW. These two are for the notification I'll show you about very shortly. So CW, our results are going to go right here, CA4 to CW, and we want unique records. That's going to run our advanced filter. Next up, I need to know that's going to run it and get us our results. The next thing I need to do is I need to check if there is data. For example, we need to check for the last row of those results. If the last row is less than 5, we know there's no data, and we can skip everything else since there's no data. So let's look at that. On our next line of code, if the last filter row is less than 5, then go to no notifications. What that's going to do is going to skip all of this and go right down here to no notifications and just end the sub right there. Nothing else is going to happen because there is no notifications that need to be sent out. So in that case, there's nothing to be done. Okay, assuming that the row is equal to or greater than 5, we can continue back. The first thing we want to do is what I spoke of. We want to sort the list. And I want to sort it CV5 as the header. That is the send on. We need to center that, we need to sort that based right here, CV5, which is the first row of data. I'm going to sort that based to the last row and sort them all. So we can do that here. First, we want to make sure that the sort fields are clear, so we're going to clear that out. We're going to set our range to the key is going to be CV5. We want to sort the values, and we just want to sort ascending, smallest to greatest. In dates, we want the earliest date first, and that's going to be ascending, and then we're going to sort normal. So we're going to set the range CA5 to CW. We're going to set that's our entire range of data. That's where it starts. We're going to apply that filter, and that's going to sort that so that we can now, when we run through the list, we can run it. The first thing we want to do is check CF5. It is less than now. What is CV5? Let's look at that. It's going to be the first available, the earliest reminder. Is it less? Is it less than the current time? If it is, we need to send out that reminder, whether it's an email, notification, or both. We need to send it out right away because we've set the reminder for before, so we need to send it out right away. So just send it out. However, if this is at a later time on the current date, then schedule it. So there's two options. One, send it out right now because the time is before the current time. Or two, this scheduled time is after the current time, and so we need to schedule it. Two options. So let's look at those two options. The first of which, if it's less than now, then we're going to create the macro notifications create. We're going to do that right now. If it's not, else, that means the data is at a later time. We can comment this out. I can uncomment this. Application on time. I just commented out because we're not going to be scheduling anything now, but this would work. Application on time, right? We're going to, what are we going to do? What's the time? This is the time here. This is the date and time. CV5. That's when we need it to run. And what is it that we want to run at that? We want to run this right here. I want to run this macro at this time, and application on time is going to allow us to do that. So either A, we run it right now, or B, we run it at this time. So when it's commented out, I just commented out because I didn't want to schedule anything to happening during the training. I don't want emails to get created or some crazy things to happen. So application on time. This is the time, and what do we want to happen? This. So that's how we do it. That's how we do it. And next up, so as soon as that gets done, either notifications now or could. So let's just assume we have 3 of them that need to be sent out now because the time's before. So then we go to the second macro, and that's notifications create. This is the macro that creates those notifications right here. So these macros, and we can now we're going to comment that out. So let's go ahead and uncomment that out because now we can focus on this. So now what I want to do is I want to create either an email or I want to create a pop-up based on the conditions. And what are the conditions? Well, the first condition is does the user selected a pop-up. Yes, if this is yes, then send the pop-up. If this is yes, then send the email. So in this case, let's just mark these as no. I should do this on the original data. So in this case, just one email will be created and one pop-up will be created. So if we run this macro right here, we're going to see that an email gets created. But of course, in this particular email, we didn't set anything as a subject and template, so nothing's going to show up. We didn't have anything. But also what we did have, when we go look in the schedule, we'll see automatically we have a pop-up that comes up. Here's annual review should be scheduled within a week. Email has been sent from Randy. Now you take a look at that template and say, well, where did that information come? And that's based on the review template. So when we go back into the admin and we look at our review is right here, and we see here on our pop-up notification, we have employee's name, annual review should be scheduled, email has been sent from username. So you see, it's all based on this. The email that we created didn't have any default. So if we look under the events here, when we look at that particular event under, let's take a look at this one right here, Peggy's review, there's no email information here, but had we set any, it would have showed up. All right, so that gives you an idea of what we're looking to perform. And let's go ahead and see how we did that in this macro. Now I've commented out some stuff just so it doesn't automatically create, but it's going to create a lot of them. If we pull these out and we go ahead and create them, it's going to create them all as we created. So it's going to create them all. Now if we run this macro, it's going to update. Let's go ahead and take a look at the events list and go back into there, and you'll see that now we have just 3. Now we have just 3 here that we've hit because they've been sent. So let's take a look back on that event and we'll see why didn't that show up again. That particular event here in row 13, that now has a sent on right here. You see that? 12:17, 8:17, that's the current time. That reminder has been set, so this is no longer going to come up in our filtered list because we're only focused on those that have blank and are after the current date. So those are important. All right, so set reminder 4. Now we have a limited list. So let's go ahead and see how we did that. Back into the VBA code, we've got a lot of dimensions. We're going to use Outlook, so we're going to dimension the application and the email's objects. We're going to do a whole bunch of event information as strings. We don't need to go on, and some, of course, as dates, event, start on, end on, create. We have more strings, employee information. We need to define all that, leave type. All of the information associated with the event, we need to information. So that's we also need to find an employee. Now I've got an employee ID here, but I need to pull an employee address, employee email address, right? I've got the employee ID right here. But what I've got an employee name, but this may or may not be accurate. What if we've changed the employee name? That's why employee name is not so important. Employee ID is very important because employee ID is going to allow me to go back into the employee list and pull out their first name, the last name, if I have the ID. And it's going to also allow me to pull their email address right here. So we're going to need that. So based on their employee ID, I'm going to need to find their employee information. So we need to set those ID as range. So the first thing we want to do is set the employee ID as range. That's going to, sheet 2 is where our employee list is located. Employee ID is the named range that we've set up. We've been over that before. Just look up employee ID in the name range. You're going to see that leads to the employee ID list. We're going to set the username. Remember, sheet 14, B10, and user email, B11. We've set those in the login information. Let's take a look at that. Just remember, B10 is our username, B11 is our user email. That's going to help us because when we send out emails, we're going to need to know both of those information. All right, with sheet 7, that of course is our events list. We're going to focus. We've run our filter now. Now we need to know. We know everything's going to be in row 5. We're just focused on the first one. Event name, CB5. That's going to get us our event name. Event type, event notes, in CG6. So basically all I'm doing right now is I'm going through and defining each one of these. I'm going through the event name, CB, right? Event type, employee ID, and I'm just defining each one of these and putting those in variables right here. So I want all those in variables. So we do that because that information is going to either need to be in an email or perhaps in a notification. So we need to pull all of those variables, right? Because we have a whole list of possible variables here. We need to get them all because that may be in an email message or it may be in a pop-up text. So we need to get all that information. All right, so that's why we need to pull it through all of it. So we've event created on, the start on date, end on date, leave type, email to, all of that information, BCC, we're going to pull all of that right from row 5 of our filtered list. So now that we've got all that information, now we're ready to put it in an email. But the first thing I need to do is I need to get the employee name and email. But to do that, I need to get the employee ID. We know that's in CE5. I just showed that to you, right? That's our filtered list in the events list, CE5 right here. That's the one we're focused on here. Then what I need to do is I need to find that employee ID. And where am I going to find it? I'm going to find it in the employee ID range. We're going to run use find, and we're going to find the employee ID. We're looking in values, and we're looking at whole values. So once we find it, if it's found, we can set the row. If not found is nothing. Remember, nothing and not cancel each other out. So we're basically saying if the employee is found, then set the name and set the email. The name, of course, is going to be sheet 2B. Remember, I'm using the first name. If you want to use like the last name, use a different column, right? I'm using B. B is where our first name is located in the employee list right here, B. But if you want, I'm using the last name. Actually, C is the first name. B is the last name, right? So if you want to use the last name or first name, you can use it right here, right? So that's how we do it. Let me set that to C. I want to use their first name, which is C. But if you want to use their last name or you want to use their full name, you can do that as well. The email is located in column M. Column M is where their email. So we pull that information using the found row. The found row is here. That's how we know the row. All right, next up, we need to find if CN equals 5, then send an email. Why CN? Well, if we look back on our events list and we look at our filtered data right in here, we'll see that we have this email right here, CN. If this is yes, yes, or yes, we need to send it. Okay, so we need to do that if necessary. If this is yes, do a pop-up and then continue on. So let's go ahead and take a look at this. If it's yes, then we're going to send the email. So if it's yes, we're going to do all of this. And then after that, we're going to check for a note. If the CM is yes, that means send that pop-up notification or create that pop-up notification. All right, so the first thing I need to do is I need to take the email to. The email to, we're going to take the existing email to, whatever's been set here, and we're going to replace it with the possibility if the user has added in user email, I want to replace it with the exact user email. If they have added this the employee email, I want to replace it with the actual employee email. So there's two possible emails plus whatever they might have had there. We're adding to it or replacing it. So that means any instance of this user email with the brackets, we're going to replace that with the actual user email. And again, any instance where there's employee email, we're going to replace that with the actual employee email. All right, moving on, BCC is going to be exactly the same, except we're starting with BCC. We're starting with this, and then we're replacing any other possible instances of the variables with the actual emails. The subject, we're doing the same thing, except in this case, we're replacing lots of stuff. We're all of those variables. Event name, event type, we're replacing anything with brackets, we're replacing it with the actual event. So all this code does is it replaces anything with brackets and replaces it with the actual notes. So that's how we replace it. So when the user has set specific brackets, we want to take these brackets, this employee name brackets, and we want to replace it with the actual employee name. If we have specific end date and end time, we want to replace it with the actual end date and time. So taking those brackets and replacing with the actual values is very important. All right, next up, what we need to do is we need to then once we have all the information, we are ready to create. We've created our subject, the same thing. We've created our message, replaced all the variables, and now we're ready to create the email. So we're going to set the Outlook as to create the object, Outlook application. We're going to create a new email with that using set Outlook application. And then with that new email, we're going to, the to is going to be the email to. The BCC is going to be the email BCC, subject, subject, message, message. And of course, if the attachments is not blank, then we're going to add the attachments. We always want to make sure it's not blank because it'll create an error if it tries to add something that's blank. So we want to make sure. And then we're going to display it. Now, in your case, when you're ready to go and you're ready to launch your application, you don't want this to display. You want to use .send. Use .send to send the email without displaying first. That's going to create the email, and then we just cleaned it up. So that creates our email. Next up, we need to check for the notification. All right, what we're going to do is we're going to say if CM5 equals yes. What is CM5? Again, that is in our events list CM right here. That means they have requested to create a pop-up. If this is yes, we want to create a pop-up. Now, what I've also done here is I've created a formula. I need to know the notification text. What is the notification text? Well, that is right here in the admin. For example, if this is training, I need to know this. So what I need to do is I need to find the event type here in the admin setting. I need to find it, whether it's new hire or training. That's why, remember, there's only one each, so one instance. So I need to find that one instances. Then I need to look all the way over here into column K, and I need to pull this information. This is the notification text. And I need to take that, I need to put it right here in the events list. I need to put it right here. So to do that, we can use index. We're going to index admin, right? This is going to be K520. We're going to index all those events, K521 through L541 right here. We're going to index right here, starting here. Indexing right here, indexing those notification types right here. We're going to index those. So once we find the row using match, we're going to be able to locate it. So we're going to index these notification texts. And then moving next up on the events list, once we have that index, we're going to use match. We're going to use the match. What are we matching? We're going to matching whatever's in C5. What's in C5? That's the event type, right? I need to know the event type. We need to find the event type in that list, find out what row it's on, and then return us whatever's in that in column K through L, column K through L, because it's a merge cell, right? It's a merge cell. And we're going to use the first column, which is K. So we're going to find it within the notification event types. This is the named range for our admin, right? This is the named range. So when we look here, right, and you scroll down all the way down to the bottom, this is a named range right here. Here it is, notification event type. We're looking on that. We're looking in that range. We're going to find training. We're going to find review. Once we find it, we know it's on row 524. Once we know it's on 524, we can index our notification text and put it right there. All right, so that is how we did that. So that's basically what I need is I need to know the original information. In this case, of course, it's set leave to begin. So in this case, it's scheduled set leave to begin, employee name, start next day, right? So that is the notification text for leave. Let's take a look here. For leave, right? So when we go back on leave and we look at leave, we see scheduled leave set to begin for, and you'll see here it is. I've selected it, schedule leave set begin. So we're just going to return that information. I need that information. And then what I need to do is I need to replace the data variables. I need to replace employee name with the actual employee name, and I need to replace start or next date. In this case, just those two variables with the actual data. So in the events list, moving back, I've done that in this. We're going to do that, and I'm going to put it right here. I'm going to put it right here. So here's the default text, right? That with the variables, and then I'm using VBA, I'm going to replace employee name, in this case with AMSers, right? And I'm going to replace the start with 9:30 a.m., the start date or time. So that is how it's going to be set. So that's how we replace it. Okay? And now what I want to do is I want to set this pop-up to this. Remember that yellow pop-up? I need to set it for this exact step. So how do we do that? Well, let's go ahead and take a look at that. If we look and we unhide, we show our panel, and we see we have something called notification group. If we unhide that and close this, zoom out, let's find where it is. Here it is, all the way over there. Okay, zoom back in. Now we see, let's take a look at this. So now we have this is hidden but it's very helpful. We don't need it visible, I just need it there. So let's move it over to our cells where it's connected to. Move it all the way over. This is our hidden notification group. This is the one that we're going to copy each time to whatever. This one stays hidden, but it's going to be very helpful. Here it is. Now, this one, if we click on it, we see it's connected to a cell CY5. So that means whatever is in CY5 is going to appear here. So that way, CY5 is here. So that means in this case, CY5 is this, CY5. So now using VBA, all we need to do is take this, replace the variables, and put it right in here. So let's go ahead and go into VBA and see just how we did that. All right, so we know, first of all, I need to take CM5 is yes, then notification text is equal to, what are we starting out with? The notification text. Where did that come from? All the way up here under notification text. CX5 is our notification. This is what we're starting with. What's in CX5? Again, here, CX5. This is our starting point for our notification text. It includes, of course, the variables. So we're going to start with that, but then I'm going to replace, again, using replace, I'm going to replace every instance of anything with brackets using this replace. Anything with brackets, for example, end date and time with brackets, we're going to replace that with the end on. We may need to format these a little bit better later on, so I'll check on that. But we had so much to cover. There may be some formatting issues. We may want to format it as date, times, or both, so we'll focus on that in a little bit. But it may not be perfect just yet, but you get the base. So basically, anytime there's an instance of employee name, we're going to replace that with the actual employee name and so on, just like we did within the email. And then what I want to do is once I have this complete with all this, I want to take this and I want to put it in CY5. CY5 equals the notification text. CY5 is the connected cell right here. So if we were to place this with, gibberish, it's going to change automatically in that note. Automatically. So anything we change in CY5 is going to be placed on that note. We'll zoom in a little bit so you can see it, but you get the idea. Then what I want to do is, okay, I've got the note, but I don't know, first of all, this note is hidden, right? Normally it's hidden. And I don't know, maybe the user is going to be on the admin, or maybe they're going to be here. We don't know what screen they're viewing. We have no idea. We can use active. So what I want to do is I want to take that note, I want to copy it. So for example, let's say it's here, right? I want to copy it, Control C. Right click copy, and then I want to basically place it on whatever they're doing. Whatever, let's say they're on attachments and looking at something, I want to paste it right here. I want to paste it right on whatever screen they're looking at. And then I want to assign a macro, then I want to give them the ability to close it. Right click, assign macro. This macro has already been created. It's called notification close, and all that does is it uses the active sheet and deletes a shape called, let's cancel that out, deletes the shape called notification group. Notification group is the name we've associated with that, and we can just delete it. So closing it's actually going to delete it. We would not want to create too many, we just need one. So there's no problem to delete it because all we did was created a copy, so we can delete it, no problem. All right, so once we're done, this wraps the text. The reason we do this is because if not, this is a large text file. Under events, let's go back into the list. This is a large text file, or it can be, and this 5 is going to get this big. It's, when there's a lot of text here, we don't want that, right? So when we wrap the text, it automatically resets that row to back its normal size. So wrapping the text keeps that row from enlarging. We don't need it as we just need it as a standard row height, and that's fine for our purposes. So this range 5, this covers it. The entire row is going to wrap text equals false, just so it doesn't wrap and the row remains to stay the current height. Next up, we're going to take the shape. We know it's on this sheet, right? We know it's hidden, but it's there. Notification, we're going to copy that. And then active sheet, we're just going to select any cell in the active sheet. Whatever the sheet the user's on, we're going to select A1. And then we're going to active sheet, we're going to paste. We're going to paste because we've copied that shape. We're going to paste it right in there. And then, of course, I want to reset the height often. Every time when we paste it, it does get reset. So I want to reset the height. And then I want to paste it right, I want to set the height to the proper height and the width to the proper width, just so it doesn't get realigned. And then we're going to set the left and the top to the active cell. That's going to put that notification in the upper left. Then the last thing is we're going to make it visible. So that is how it works. And the last thing is we're going to select the active sheet just to make sure that we have selected something other than shape. I don't want that shape selected. I want something else shape. So this unselect, or we could just select any cell to do that. That's pretty easy. Next up, what we're going to do is we're going to set the reminder. Now I need to know whether we've set the email or whether we sent the notification. We need to make sure that this reminder doesn't go out again. And to do that, we need to know what I want to do is I want to put the current date and current time here, but not in here. I don't want to put it in here. This is our results. I want to put it in right here in the original data. I want to put it right here. Column R. I want to find the row and I want to put it right here. Whatever time they've been reminded on, the date and time, I want to put it right here. And to do that, we need to know the row. But the good thing is we brought the row over. This row is included automatically in our data table, so it makes it a lot easier. So when we know the row is here. I know the original row. That's why we include it in the filter data. So if the row is 25 and we know the column is R, we can easily bring it right over and bring it right down and put it here. So that's just what we're going to do. So I'm going to pull the row right out of CW. Take that row, and then I know the columns are, and put the current time in. That's going to keep that reminder from running again. We don't want it to run again because it's been done. So we can do that by simply saying R in the event row. Where's the event row? Well, let's way back up here under event row right here, event row CW5. That's just going to pull the event row. So now we have the event row. So now it's very, very simple to place that current date, and we just do now. That's going to place the current date and the current time. And then next up, the next thing I want to do is I want to run these notifications once more. We've only done one row. This is one row, but now I want to run this all again. I want to run this entire check again. I want to go through the entire list again because it's not going to include the list. So when we run that check, we're going to see that it goes back and forth and runs through all of them just to check. And in this case, look, this particular created two different ones. Why two different ones? Well, if we look on our reminder, we had two different, we set the emails to no, so it didn't want to create any emails, but it did set to, we had two different termination clocks. So now we just close that and close that and close that. So we had three different, so now they've all been set. We had those emails to set to no, so it didn't create the emails, but we had yes set on the notification pop-ups. So it's going to create pop-ups for all the notifications that you need. So that's really, really handy. So that is how we covered that. So that's the end of that. And this, of course, we have one to schedule. I'm going to keep this off here, but I want you to reset it. Just for now, we don't want these applications until we're completely set. But once we're ready, we just uncomment that out, and it's going to automatically create those notifications on a specific time. I'm going to keep that commented out. This keeps things from going on, on your computer when they're unattended, because we're not quite ready with this application. We're just developed. We need to do more bug testing. There's probably a few bugs in here. I'm going to continue to test it as I build this, and then of course we'll have this ready for you shortly on Tuesday as always. So we've gone over a lot. Let's go ahead and do a little refresher. We've gone through this, how we're going to run an advanced filter to those without reminded on. We're going to sort that list based on all of those, and then we're going to create, whether it's an email or a pop-up reminder for those that are required at a specific date or automatically if it's before the date. We've created a login screen. We've created a brand new login. We've showed you how to remove the border and hide the passwords, OK and close, how to design a special screen like this. So we went over that. We went over Pixlr, how we use that website for design. In the admin screen, we created a brand new tab called Event Notifications, where we have the ability to create multiple notification defaults based on an event type. And we can create one for each event type, and that includes an email defaults as well as a pop-up notification defaults using multiple dynamic variables. And we can create whether it's adding new or deleting. We've showed you how to do all of that. So that's it. We've gone over a ton of new features in this. It's over extended training. I hope you like it. As always, I do appreciate your shares, likes. If you do get a chance, please check out my dashboard course if you can. It's getting great reviews, and people are really happy with it, so you'll love that. I'll include the links down below for that as well. All right, thank you so much for joining me. Have a great day.